Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitbadger.com, out here today to talk about how not to be a poor. When I say being poor, am I talking about the destitute living on the street? No, I'm not. I'm talking about the pseudo well-off, completely mortgaged life, living in deep debt. You're poor. So if you can't basically within 1 month pay off all debts, you're pretty much poor. So with that caveat and an explanation. Caveat, of course, being mortgage on a house. I mean, if you saved up to buy your first house with cash, bad on you. You should have mortgaged that a long time ago and paid your mortgage rather than rent for probably years. But what do I mean by, again, being poor? Well, if you, again, can't within a month basically pay off all debts, barring a mortgage, what do you have? You honestly have a lot of debt. Like, that's what you have. And with having all that debt, whether you appreciate it or not, you are very limited in a lot of your choices. You are beholden, like you're enslaved in a manner of speaking, whether it's to things or as an extension of those things, creditors, or even as an extension of all that stuff, your employer. What do I mean by that? If you're living in debt, massive debt, which most Americans are, not very free. Like, you're poor. You are incredibly limited in that, yeah, you are absolutely beholden to all of those things that are financed, whether it's actual like big thing, like, man, I need this bass boat and the trailer, and obviously a fancy lifted truck, because how else am I going to pull the trailer? If you like bass fishing, like, cool, fill in the blank with whatever. But more often than not, a lot of those things are financed. It's a massive liability, and again, like, makes you poor, and it makes you beholden, because now you are not very risk adverse to maybe do something that you actually want to do. Maybe something you're passionate about that you, again, not willing to take that risk because you have this massive payment that you need to service. And it can be anything, whatever lifestyle you're funding at the time. And I don't say this because I'm smart. I say this because I went through it. If I was smart, I would have seen someone that went through it and learned from them. But I didn't, and I had plenty of opportunities for growth. So I will share my experience. As some of you know, I used to do security contract. Did it for about 6 years. Pretty sweet. Wake up in the morning, $575, I think was my daily rate at the end. Bam. Work half the year. Honestly, part of what led to the dissolution of my marriage, and honestly gave me a really bad relationship with money, because I'm like, oh, it's only $1,500. It's like 3 days. No, that's $1,500. That's pretty significant. Again, bad relationship with money, and knowing I was just going to deploy for another 2 or 3 months, make another, I don't know the math, 20, 30,000, whatever it is. I'm like, whatever. Just keep some credit card debt, like 15,000 or whatever. And eventually that crashed. It crashed in the sense of ended up getting a divorce. So got a divorce, not a fun divorce. I want to say probably the lawyer fees were basically double all of our combined assets. So the lawyers won 100%. Bummer. Also not surprising. And so you can, things change sometimes faster than you would like. So I found myself in a position where the rug got pulled out. Keep in mind, if you want to no longer be poor and enslaved to debt, you can either have the choice made for you, or you can make the simple but really hard choice, or you can have a combination of the two. For my own part, combination of the two. In that, getting divorced, some things came to light for me, like, hey, what's actually important? namely being a father and being present. And so the tough choice was walking away from like 125 grand for only working 6 months out of the year, because I would rather have my boys half the time, week on, week off, versus a quarter of the year. Like literally doubling my time with the boys. What that translated into was me being very poor very quickly. And when I say poor, I mean like no money. So I went from, deploying, making like $575 a day, to then working part-time landscaping, kneeling down weeding in my Arc'teryx kneecaps, as well as working part-time like stocking shelves at a grocery store. Pretty rough road. Not a fun transition. While you can honestly find happiness living within your means, it's very easy to scale your lifestyle with your income. So the more you make, the more you spend, and going into debt incrementally, you just continue to do that exponentially, and you wind up in a ton of debt. And I ended up there. And so again, circumstance was part of it, choice was the other part of it. And for you, it could be one or the other, or both, like who knows. Ideally choice, because it's more fun when you choose something yourself. Doesn't mean it's easier. And so going back to choice, I made that choice to walk away from the job I was doing, and not only so that I could be with my boys, so that I could also do something fulfilling. And I was then free to, because I was no longer risk adverse, because that job was gone. And I started Kit Badger, which, man, long, slow road. There were a number of months, reached out to cousins, plural, more than one, was like, hey, you said if I could borrow some money, you would have some to loan me. I'm like $400 short rent. I know I have a check coming. I don't know when it'll be here. Sure, no problem. Awesome. Like, not an easy road. Plenty of time sleeping in the airport, flying on a friend's buddy pass because I couldn't afford tickets. Whatever, it was part of it. And I wasn't going into debt. And so choice, also circumstance. Circumstance being no credit cards, like would not give me any. So I had a debit card. So if there was money in the account, there was money in the account. And if there wasn't, there wasn't. That was a pretty rough road to walk. And to this day now, like, I guess almost like 8 years later, something like that, still have a debit card. And I now have one credit card, which is a secured credit card. If you're unfamiliar with what it is, you put however much you want on that credit card, 500, $1,000. And now your credit card only has that balance. And if you don't pay that balance, then they'll take it out of that money that's sitting secure for your balance. Keep you out of trouble. Some of you are like, who cares? This doesn't apply to me. If it doesn't, if you're not living in debt, like awesome, good for you, because it's not easy. Others are just like, I'm gonna live my fancy life. I can service my debt, which is great, right up to the point you can't. And another limiting factor which people don't appreciate is you're enslaved. We'll say in this case to your employer, because if something comes along, you have such a massive payment that you need to service that one, you can't do what you want, i.e., hey, you know what? Like I am actually passionate about this. I would like to do this instead of this job I went to college for and feel compelled to do. You can't do it because you are so burdened by the debt you carry that it doesn't free you to do that. The other part is, right, wrong, or otherwise, you are no longer able to, largely in a position, to make choices you would otherwise want to make. What do I mean by that? I really don't care one way or another if you ended up getting stuck and getting the V during all that stuff in 2020. Honestly, I don't care at all. I'm actually more curious on if you know why you did whatever you did, whether you got it or you didn't. But there were a number of people that were adamantly opposed to it, and they went ahead and got it. Why? Because they had so much debt that they could not service, and they had built a lifestyle that scaled with their income, that they got into a position where it was basically untenable. Like they felt, hey, I am gonna lose everything, lose all of your things, if you ended up basically not complying and having to find occupation elsewhere. Again, you could have made that choice. It's not an easy choice because no one likes to scale their lifestyle. I get it, but you also put yourself in that position. Again, don't really care what side of that coin you're on, whether, hey, you're for this, hey, you're against it, simply using it as a thought experiment. Although for some people it was very real. Again, being enslaved. Some of you, I'm sure, just like, Ivan, shut up, just show me the next cool piece of gear I need to buy and go into further debt. It's gonna somehow make me a better shooter. Spoiler, quick side, honestly, probably the best thing you could do that could just, across most levels, to include make you a better shooter, invest in a good mattress and actually get good sleep on the regular. Dang, no, I'm not gonna do mattress reviews. But with this in mind, where do we go? Like, how do we move forward? Well, scale, like your lifestyle, under whatever your means are. What does that look like? It maybe looks like, one, getting things you actually need. We'll start with that metric. Looking to make a purchase. Is this going to, one, do I actually need this? i.e., I need to show up for work with steel-toed boots. You probably need to buy a pair of steel-toed boots. And at that point, you're probably going to look at, hey, how cheap is this versus how expensive, but then also the longevity of that because this is the career I'm in. Probably be a good investment to get good ones, but that's something you would actually need. Largely, most things are wants. One place I will say, depending on you and your lifestyle, that I would say is arguably worth spending money on is food, because unfortunately, the cheapest food is the crappiest food. So depending on how conscious you are with respect to health and well-being, that might be a place to spend money. But largely, if you start to look through stuff, there's a lot of places you can save money, to include not having like 14 streaming services. Do you need those? I'm not telling you how to live your life. You do whatever works for you. But I'm telling you, having scaled my life with my income and then realizing I was really poor, and then now working diligently to keep my lifestyle below my income. And again, like, I don't have the things, like I don't have a lot of things, but I've also realized that a lot of those things just don't have value. And I think I mentioned in another video, like, the best thing I bought with respect to my family, it's been a Berkey water filter. Like, it literally just sits on the counter and filters water. It's great. Great for daily use, great in case of an emergency where there's like a boil advisory that comes out 2 days late. Yeah, good for my family as well as myself. But there's very few things that, well, very often we convince ourselves we need something. Usually we don't. And all of that stuff leads to accumulating this massive debt, which makes you poor. Again, the rug can come out at any time, like through no fault of your own. You may very well like get into a car accident and no longer be able to be employed in which the way you were. If you have this massive backloaded debt to service, that creates a lot of complications. Ivan, what if YouTube can't? Man, if YouTube canceled my channel, I would pivot and figure out something. I have a number of skills, bow staff skills, nunchucks, just kidding. But no, I would figure it out, especially having created Kit Badger from nothing. It'd be like, challenge accepted. Let's do it again. This time it'll be better. But without having a ton of, like, a mountain of debt behind me to service, I'm actually freed up to make those choices and to also just be like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I'm going to go work over here and do this thing. Free to make choices, which is a big deal, not to be confused with being poor and beholden to things, creditors, and potentially your employer. Where do you potentially go from here? Again, live at least or under your means. Is that going to be comfortable? Probably not. You might have to scale your lifestyle, but how much of your lifestyle was for the sake of show because you felt compelled to versus things that are actually meaningful? Some of the most fun I had with my boys recently was honestly playing catch at the park with our Frisbee. Pretty low investment. Or having our little in-house Pokemon tournament. Tons of fun. Pretty low investment. Really fun. Like enjoyable, actually quality of life type thing. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I really love the freedom of choice. So to that end, like you do you, because part of freedom is everyone gets to do their own thing. But having been through that, not necessarily fun. And it is avoidable. Again, you can either have a circumstance create it, or you can make a very simple but very difficult choice of actually scaling your life. Again, not necessarily fun, but I think you'll find a lot of freedom comes with that, and depending on what you actually value in life, might be worth it. Or just live mortgage to the hilt. You do you. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah.